After a brief excursion to a police procedural to find a bombing suspect, we're finding religion again in a big way. During choir practice, a Catholic priest is lured out of the booth by a mysterious confessor and burned at the stake in the parking lot. The intercutting violence with the ecstatic choir is a chilling opening to the episode. It's Sunday, and Frank is making breakfast for the entire family when Benny the dog starts barking. A bird is flown errantly into the window, which triggers Frank and Catherine trying unsuccessfully to hide death and tragedy from Jordan. Frank gets a call from the group to investigate the priest's death in Tacoma, where he's reunited with Ardis Cohen, played by House of Cards' Lindsay Crouse. If you're a regular viewer of the channel, you probably know her from Season 4 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Or, if you're cultured, she was also nominated for an Academy Award. I'm sure she's more proud of her work on Buffy, though. Frank and Ardis tag team the local detective with medieval torture lore, demonstrating why both of these people only exist as +1s at any social event.
He's wearing a San Benito.
What's that?
During the Middle Ages, heretics were forced to wear it before they were burned at the stake.
Frank explains that there were similar cases 4 years earlier, and they stopped until now. Ardis and Frank examine the body, allowing Ardis to engage in one of my least favorite Millennium cliches, as she clumsily drops some anatomical exposition.
When the threshold drops below 21%, thankfully, you pass out.
People explain things to Frank that he would already know.
Applying the Holmes criteria and defining serial killers involving 3 victims with a time period between murders of at least 30 days.
And I know what they're really doing is explaining to the audience, but that's why you always have an excuse to have a Watson in your scene who asks the questions that the audience might ask. That dynamic worked really well in the previous scene with the local detective, but here it feels like Frank is either ignorant of these facts or the supporting cast just likes to yap, and neither of those are good things. Again, it may seem like a small detail, but it does affect how the scene plays. Frank runs into Father Schultz, and since Frank is alone with a priest, you just know we're going to have a philosophical discussion about evil. Actually, Frank Black probably has the same conversations with his barista. Father Schultz quite practically reasons that people often seek to fill the voids in their lives with faith, and when it doesn't completely solve their problems, they turn on the clergy. Frank mentions his own faith is lacking, which according to Millennium lore was a compromise between Carter and actor Lance Henriksen. The original script called for Frank to express his atheistic views here, but Henriksen felt it would be better for Frank to have complex and conflicted feelings about faith. It's a good call by Henriksen, especially since he just saw the incarnation of a devil a few episodes earlier, and it also removes the Scully problem of seeing all these things happen and trying to ramrod a rational explanation into it. At home, Frank receives crime scene photos from the 1992 St. Louis burnings, but Catherine interrupts and admits that she lied to Jordan about parents living forever. Yeah, about that. Frank has to skirt the issue without providing Jordan much in the way of guidance. We get another cliche as Frank examines the photos with one of those computers that can enhance tiny elements of the frame. I'm not mad at it, it's a fun cliche, but it was 1996. Frank probably had to wait for Catherine to get off the phone with Domino's before he could solve crimes. Or maybe the Millennium group had Nano Banana and just kept it to themselves. In a break in continuity, another retired priest is stalked and bludgeoned on a golf course and drowned this time. This happens during the day, even though it's sandwiched in between 2 night scenes at the Black household. Sometimes you just gotta say to hell with continuity. Frank busts out the term semiotic to explain the killer's reasons. Semiotics. The killer is switching denominations as well, so it's not about a particular religion, but faith itself. Ardis and Frank find an engagement ring washed up on the shore of the lake. Engraved on the ring are some initials, which leads to a Reverend Harnett and Cheyenne. They miss the killer by minutes, but it doesn't take long to trace Harnett to Galen Calloway. Calloway's family died in a fire, in which Calloway's hands were disfigured. Frank theorizes that Calloway is trying to kill the concept of faith itself. The explanation is somewhat convoluted to avoid cliché, but essentially Calloway is killing clergymen in an attempt to vanquish his own faith. Calloway, it turns out, hasn't lost faith in God, but he does believe that he's abandoned us. Calloway takes an entire church hostage, but Frank intervenes and talks him down. In the coda, Frank wakes Catherine up and says that they shouldn't hide their faith from Jordan, nor should they hide the evils of the world from her. The trick is to balance the evils with hope. And we're out. Kingdom Come is the 4th episode in the production order, but it aired as the 6th episode, being delayed by the network out of respect to Cardinal Joseph Bernardine, a popular Chicago cardinal who passed away just a few weeks prior. It doesn't change much in the way of plotting, since Millennium was still very much a case of the week show at this point, but it does give us a little more context as to Jordan's dreams. There is a double meaning in the Exodus quote to open the episode. In its biblical context, the quote refers to the 9th plague inflicted upon Egypt, a literal darkness that engulfed the region. In the episode, this darkness is the void inside Calloway that he spreads to the rest of the world in the hopes of finding help for his own despair. The concept of pain being exacerbated by faith is an interesting one. If you are unable to write off the existence of God, then you have to admit he either caused or allowed your suffering to happen. Losing your religion at least makes death a chaotic occurrence or a random happenstance rather than the divine machinations of a possibly evil God. Unfortunately, not enough of that makes it to the screen. They mostly pay lip service to it as a means to figure out the motives, which will in turn allow them to catch a killer. It's a fine line because people don't tune in for ponderous dissertations on Thomas Aquinas. They want 7, but every week. The murder part is just not all that interesting at this point, though, and the show's ratings were beginning to reflect that. There's nothing particularly wrong with the episode, although it does waste Lindsay Crouse in a role that nearly any regular TV actress could have done. The only bit of note is Ardis's frustrated conversation with Frank over the nature and value of faith, but that too seems wedged into the script based on when and where it occurs in the story. This also is a precursor to a multitude of religion and philosophy-themed episodes to come. Brace yourselves.